In this video, we're going to learn about the Newberry Tablet. The Newberry Tablet is another potential ancient Native American artifact with writing on it, and we'll look at it in terms of whether it's authentic or not, and whether it could relate to the Book of Mormon. It was found in 1896 in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, and the language on it is currently undeciphered. Let me show you the tablet, and we'll talk about the evidence about whether it's authentic or not. So let's cover the basic background. So the Newberry Tablet was discovered in 1896. There were two lumberjacks who were hired to clear some land. Apparently, it was right after a storm that had caused some trees to fall over. And when they were clearing the land, stuck in the roots of one of the trees that had fallen over in the storm was the Newberry Tablet, sometimes called the Newberry Stone, along with a couple of clay figures or statues. And the tablet was 19 by 26 inches. It has 140 characters on it, and they ended up taking it in. It was sent to the University of Michigan. Pictures were also sent to the Smithsonian. At that time, it was considered a forgery. It was held for a while, just locally. This is in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, so between Lake Superior and Lake Michigan, in the land there, just north of a town called Newberry. And eventually, because it was considered to be a forgery, it fell apart. The tablet was made of clay. Now, there are some people that describe it as having been a stone, but it wasn't a stone. It was a form of clay, and over time, that clay has crumbled. All right, so just scrolling down here, this is what the tablet looks like. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 across. There's 14 down. Sometimes this is shown as the bottom left, and sometimes as the top right. But some people think that if this was a language, this might have been a start point to start reading of the language. It's currently held in a little museum in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. Okay, so again, a little bit more of the story. Again, 1896, the wind that blew it over the farm was owned by a farmer named John McGuire. People since that time have considered that the lumberjacks that found it and the farmer, they clearly didn't have the knowledge or expertise or anything to create this kind of a forgery. So there's no clear explanation for how it was forged or who forged it. Some people think that it could have related to the Michigan relics. Now, in a prior video, I did a thing on the Michigan relics. There are a number of artifacts found in Michigan, and this was also both in the 1890s and then later in the 1907 to 1911 timeframe. In particular, there were a number of artifacts that were claimed to be discovered, usually deemed to be forgeries. Now, 1896 is right after that first wave of those Michigan relics. And it was also after the 1893 World Fair in Chicago, which had a large exhibit of Native American artifacts and stuff. So it was in a time frame where Native American artifacts were popular. People were excavating and making collections and so forth. Now, the Newberry Tablet doesn't look like any of the Michigan relics in that there's no mystic symbol on it and other things that are hallmarks of the Michigan relics. But nevertheless, because it came in the time frame, it was sort of swept in and considered to be part of that group of relics or forgeries. Okay, so I'll just scroll down again. You can see, as you can see, this time they put the dot in the bottom left one. It's unclear which is the correct orientation. A little bit about the statues that came with it. It said there were 3 statues This one calls it a stone tablet again. Some said brownstone, some said clay, but when I researched the scientific materials, University of Michigan, they said it was clay. So it appears to have been some sort of a baked fired clay, which is nevertheless since uh, degraded, and there's just pieces of it left at the museum. Okay, so they say of the statues that there was one that was several feet tall. They said nearly life size, so several feet tall, and it depicts a man that was sitting on something. And then there was also a woman, and then there was also what may have been a child. The This described the statues of being made of sandstone. Again, the tablet is about 18 by 25 inches, or some say 19 by 26 inches, and it's a few inches thick. Here's some pictures of the statues that came with it. Again, several feet tall, almost life size, large noses on them, kind of prominent brows, and decayed. So this is an 1896 photograph that was sent to the Smithsonian and is available there and with a tablet. Now, there are some people who have tried to decipher and translate the tablet. Most people feel like that's impossible. The tablet has 39 unique characters. So even though it's 10 by 14, so there's 140 spaces for a tablet. There are a couple of them that are blank. The 140 spaces are filled up with 39 characters. So some appear several times, some only once, and to fill it up. Okay, now I'll note that first that so this is also, you can see what the tablet looks like as the remnants of it exist now. This is a picture of what's left there, a part of what's left there at that museum in the Upper Peninsula, and they said that this is you can see why some would think it might be a brownstone, but it's actually, they said, a baked or fired clay. And then a little bit of what's left of the statue. Okay. Now, I had a different video that took a look at another artifact with potentially ancient Native American writing on it. This was the Grave Creek stone. This is another one that had symbols on it that has not been deciphered. For this one, I did a separate video on, and I thought it was potentially a Phoenician writing, because several of the alphabetic characters on it either fit directly with Phoenician or from cultures that the Phoenicians dealt with. There is a Greek professor, and he has taken the position that that he thinks that it has ancient Minoan script. Now, the Minoan civilization is on Crete. He is, obviously a researcher that lives in Crete, so he might have a little bit of inside knowledge, but also a potential bias for it. But when he's reviewed the tablet, he says that he thinks that it's a variation, or at least shows contact with the Minoan people, and so he has written a paper with his theories on that. One of the things that he does with the statue is, with that prominent nose and brows, he's found some Minoan examples with sort of prominent nose and brows as well, that he said also could relate or show similarity culturally with that statue. Now, most people consider that his conclusions here are a little bit of a stretch, but I will discuss the Minoans and that theory. I'll note that the TV series America Unearthed did a show on the Newberry Tablet. In it, they considered it, or talked about it, as if it was Minoan script, and they give a little bit of that history. So you might find that show to be interesting to you. Now, back to the Greek professor who points to similarities with ancient Minoan script. As I said, there are 39 symbols on the tablet. So he takes the 39 symbols, which are here on the left. Again, some only occur once, some will occur multiple times, and this particular symbol occurred 10 different times. And then from these symbols on the tablet, he tried to find Minoan similar symbols or letters. He also compared it to linear A and B language. And what I'll note is that some of them do seem like they could fit. Some of them seem like they're quite a stretch to try to show a connection, and some clearly don't have a connection. He thinks that that 23 of the letters have similarities to the Minoan language. So let's learn a little bit about who the Minoans were. So the Minoans were a Bronze Age civilization. This would have been at the same time as the Egyptians, Old Testament time frames before, sort of around the time that the Hebrews were in Egypt. And throughout the Mediterranean, there were several Bronze Age civilizations all existing at the same time and interacting. The Minoans lived on Crete, which is this large island just south of Greece. And it is known that the Minoans were sea traders, so they were good with boats, traveled by sea all throughout. They clearly interacted a lot with the people on Greece in particular, but with Turkey, and then also in Egypt, for example, there are some frescoes in Egypt that are attributed to the Minoans. Here, I'll go ahead and click that so you can see. I did a prior video about a place in Egypt called Avaris, which is a location that I think that may relate to where the Hebrews were when they were in Egypt. And in that location in Avaris, there are some wall paintings made by Minoans. So that's that example. Okay, so again, about the Minoans, Bronze Age, interacted with the Egyptians. They were interacting with the Phoenicians. They were interacting potentially with some of the ancient Jews, the ancient Greeks, and so forth. They in particular in this 2000 to 1500 BC timeframe. For those that follow the Book of Mormon, this would be a Jaredite timeframe in the Americas. And they have some distinctive art and pottery. I'll show you a little bit of their art. Here's some example of their art. You can see sort of a Greek style a little bit. And there's been some DNA studies and so forth of the Minoans, and when they do that, they essentially show as identical to Greek and show mixing with the European and Mediterranean cultures at the time. For example, in this DNA study from 2022, they said it's essentially the people that lived in the Aegean region at the time are not distinguishable. So you couldn't distinguish from the DNA the Minoans and the Mycenaeans or the Greeks essentially. And here's another one. This was I believe it was in Nature, yeah, in 2017, when they looked at the DNA for the genetic origins for the Minoans. They said that essentially the Minoans and the Mycenaeans were in Greece. They're genetically similar, and then they show um, interaction and partial ancestry tied to Turkey, the Aegean region, also tied to Middle Eastern populations. And so that's the type of people we're looking at. That's who the Minoans were. And taking a look at the language for the Minoans, they had a a distinct and unique language originally, and it was a form of what they call linear A, which is currently undecipherable. And then as they continued to interact with those on the Greece mainland over time, they ended up adopting more of a Greek type language and changed their writing system. So as it says here, linear A, this is kind of an example of what the Minoan ancient script looked like before they sort of adopted more of a Greek type script. And as it will say in here, it is undeciphered. So no one can read it yet. But some of the ancient writings, they have been able to crack and to now decipher those, but not with the ancient Minoan linear A language. Similar at that time, there were other Bronze Age cultures, for example, the Phoenicians and the ancient Hebrews and so forth. And looking at their alphabets, this is an example of some of the Phoenician script at the time. And when you look at the alphabet that was used on the Newberry Tablet, some of these are things that were also used in the Phoenician and Paleo Hebrew alphabet. I'll just show you that. So again, some of these things were relatively similar. And then take a look at the Paleo Hebrew. Again, some of these things are similar to what shows up on the Newberry tablet. In addition, there have been some individuals that have looked at some writings in ancient caves across Europe. This is on some ancient European cave art, and this particular person looked at some of the symbols that are on the Newberry tablet versus some ancient European type cave art and see some similarities there with some of what's on the Newberry tablet. Now, I asked AI Grok what its opinion about the language is, and asked because there are theories that it was Minoan, and the AI Grok's opinion is that it's not an authentic ancient language. Mainstream would consider it gibberish. It does have blending of Aegean, Minoan, linear A type language, also with Near Eastern type language, Phoenician, Hebrew. But it considers these would be hoax and that it's not decipherable. There is an individual named Barry Fell who tried to interpret it. He read it as a form in the Punic, which would mean Phoenician type language, as reading like this: "To you, Our Lady, the people of the North give good luck by means of birds and grain." I wouldn't put any stock in that. I think that it is an undecipherable language. Nobody can read it. All you can see from it is that it does have symbols that do relate to or do match to some authentic ancient alphabetic symbols, but nobody can read it. And because there's no one language that it fully matches to, it does have some that are like the Minoan ancient language. It does have some pieces that are sort of like Phoenician or Paleo Hebrew. There's no way to really identify what people it came from. So I put together just briefly, is the Newberry tablet authentic or not? And I'll point to a few things that point towards authenticity and a few things that point towards forgery. On the point towards authenticity, currently there's no scientific proof of forgery. And this is significant. There's, unlike some artifacts where they've been able to say, this is how it was forged, here's evidence of modern manufacture, things like that. There's no scientific proof of forgery for the Newberry tablet now. Now, part of the reason for that may be that it's has not been well studied and that it's essentially kind of crumbled and not much there. But that is one point that points towards authenticity, is that there has not been proven to be a forgery at this point. Another thing pointing towards its authenticity is that the people who discovered it, the lumberjacks and the farmer, they were not considered capable of this kind of complex forgery involving ancient languages. In addition, it does include some authentic ancient symbols or letters. Some have tried to take this argument and say that if it's Minoan, in fact, it proves that it was authentic because the Minoan civilization and its language had been forgotten to time until 1900, when when some additional discoveries were made of the Minoan civilization and language. That would work better if you could say that the language on the Newberry tablet is Minoan, but I don't think you can really say that. You can say that maybe 23 of the 39 characters could plausibly relate to the Minoan civilization, but several of those could equally plausibly relate to other Bronze Age type civilizations. Now, it's also another point towards authenticity is that the place where it was found in Newberry, north of Newberry, Michigan, is not far from a number of native copper mine locations that were being mined in this Bronze Age time frame, that 1500 BC type time frame. In the Book of Mormon, that would be the time frame, one of the time frames where the Jaredites were here in the Americas. So that is a possibility that maybe it's Jaredite, but it has symbols on it that do look like authentic ancient symbols or letters, and that do relate to the time frame where copper mining was occurring there. So there's the possibility of it being authentic. A couple of things that cause doubt and point towards possible forgery are first, again, the time frame it was found in 1896, when there was sort of this wave of forgeries that were coming out in Michigan at the time in the early 1890s, and this is just shortly after that in 1896. Another thing, and this is the main reason that most scholars will consider it a forgery, is first, it was right in a time frame where a lot of forgeries were happening, but then also that the language, the letters on it, do not fully match any known ancient language, and it's indecipherable. So most mainstream scientists would consider it gibberish. So my conclusion is that it's unknown. I'd love to be able to tell you, hey, I know this is authentic or this is forgery, but on this one I don't really know. I think that it is possibly from one of the known ancient Bronze Age cultures, like the Minoans, or it's possibly an example of Jaredite language, which is a language that we don't know what it looks like. From the Book of Mormon scriptures, the Jaredites would have come out of that Mesopotamian area, and their language would have then had some connection to those Bronze Age cultures at the time. So it is very plausible that the Jaredite language would have similar kinds of things with some of the similar symbols being used in the language from the time frame. And then it would make sense over time that their language would end up being something that is undecipherable right now, as indicated in the Book of Mormon. There was a corruption of language, and the Jaredites ended up preserving a language that we assume would have been different than what was there in the ancient Bronze Age cultures. So it's possible that the Newberry Tablet is authentic. It's possible it's an example of Jaredite language, but currently it is undecipherable. So that's what we know about the Newberry Tablet. I look forward to your thoughts and comments. I know some of you have studied a lot about these types of artifacts and ancient languages, and I look forward to what you have to say on it. Thanks.